Welcome to another Data Science, a deep dive on our technical track. In the following presentation, we have Gabriela de Queiroz, Senior Machine Learning Manager at IBM. As a data scientist or aspiring data scientist, we are overwhelmed by the amount of knowledge we need to have and acquire. And every day there is a unique technique, a new framework, a new state-of-art model. And for the last few years, deep learning has become a hot topic and is the main driver of many applications, as you know. But how can we start our deep learning journey? And which of these several deep learning frameworks should we use? Where can we find examples of code and work and that we can use without worrying about licenses? In this talk, Gabriela will show you exactly how to get started with your deep learning journey, and also how to use ready out-of-the-box deep learning services and get them to run for in less than 5 minutes. Enjoy the presentation.
My name is Gabriela de Queiroz. I work for IBM as a machine learning manager. And besides my work at IBM, I do several other projects. So I'm the founder of Our Ladies and AI Inclusive. So if you don't know about Our Ladies and AI Inclusive, I would recommend you to check it out. So ourladies.org, and it's one project put towards R and gender minorities, and AI Inclusive is my new project that I released last year to have to get more representation in the artificial intelligence field. And it's ai-inclusive.org. But today I'm here to talk about deep learning and deep learning for everyone. And my slides are also available on the link below, so you can check it out anytime. So, as a data scientist, I'm a data scientist or statistician by training and epidemiologist. We kind of as a data scientist, we do a bunch of stuff, right? So I myself did some developer advocate. I still do, go to conferences, give talks. So I work with open source. So I'm an open source developer, manager, also community builder. I do a lot of mentoring. I love mentoring. And as I mentioned, I speak a lot at events, trying to share the things that I learned and try to share with everybody, what I know. It's one of my passions. But at IBM, I work for the Center for Open Source Data and AI Technologies, CODE. So we do open source. So our goal is to make AI solutions easy to create, deploy, and manage. So we contribute and we advocate for open source technologies. And we have a team of more than 30 open source developers working a variety of projects. So this chart over here gives you an idea of the projects that we work on. So I like to see, the work that we do at CODE as we have some internal open source projects that we create, and then we make it available to all the developers, everybody. And then we have some open source projects that were not created by us per se, but we contribute to that project as well. So to give an example, we have the Data Asset Exchange, the project Elira, Egeria, AIX and AIF 360, the Model Asset Exchange. So those are projects that we created in-house, but it's open source. And then there are several other projects like Panda, Scikit-learn, Kubeflow, TensorFlow, PyTorch, Spark, that are external open source projects that we contribute. My team, the machine learning team, we are 10 open source developers working in 2 main internal projects and then external projects. So the 2 main open source projects are the Data Asset Exchange and the Model Asset Exchange. So these are internal projects that I'm going to touch on a little bit later. And then we contribute to external open source projects such as TensorFlow, PyTorch, Queiroz, Apache Arrow. Most of them are focused on deep learning. So they are deep learning frameworks. So one thing that I, as a data scientist in particular, and especially I think as aspiring data scientists or even like senior data scientists, we try to keep up to date with the new technologies and methodologies, and there are so many all the time, every day, right? So like if you search for important skills for data scientists, you're going to get a list of like all the requirements, all the the skills that you need to have to become a data scientist. And, like things like you need to know how to program in Python, Java, Perl, C, C++. You need to know Hadoop, Spark, SQL. You need to know machine learning, AI, data visualization. You need to know about structured and unstructured. There's so many skills that they list, and then you get overwhelmed, right? So you have to know also like how to identify algorithms, linear algebra, statistics, calculus, probability, and so on. So it's like the unicorn that we talk about, right? The data scientist is the unicorn. So how do you keep up with all of this? I'm not saying that you have to know all of this, but that's what they think, or some people think that we should know, and we get overwhelmed, right? There is one tweet by Jeff Team from Google. He tweeted in 2019, so last year. And he was looking at all the new papers about learning at the archive. And then there is this graph. And then, in 2018, I think it was 2018, there were more than 100 new machine learning papers being published every day. More than 100 new machine learning papers being published every day. So like, how do you keep up with this? Right. So if you want to know the new technologies, do you have to read all these papers? Like, this is just like the archive, right? So probably there are more than this. So what do you do, right? By this point, you are like, I don't know. Another example is if you go to Google Scholar, I want to know deep learning, for example. I go to Google Scholar, I'm going to search for deep learning, all the articles that talks about deep learning. So you get more than results. And if I also search for deep learning courses, you're going to get over 180 million results. So that's a lot. So like at this point, I'm totally lost. I don't know, which direction I should go. So, we are like, please, can someone help me? I don't know what to do. I'm so overwhelmed. I have so much to learn, so many things to learn. I'm lost. And then you're kind of like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I think I'm not going to become a data scientist, or, data science is not for me. So, and I have this feeling all the time because, I try to keep up, right? So like, I don't want to be behind. So that's one of the motivations behind the Model Asset Exchange, our project. So again, it's an open source project where it's a place for you as a developer, data scientist, or anyone pretty much to find and use free and open source deep learning models. So let me make a note over here. So everybody now talks about AI and deep learning. And, not all the companies, all the work that they're going to do as a data scientist, it's going to involve deep learning models. So some companies, or a lot of the companies, are doing deep learning now, but like especially like very, very small companies, they are pretty much like doing data cleaning and creating databases. So to get to the deep learning phase, it's going to take a while. But we are, as data scientists in industry, we are moving more towards this kind of applications like methodologies, right? So the Model Asset Exchange is a place where you can find a collection, like several open source deep learning models that you can use that are ready for you to use. So we have more than 30 open source models, deep learning models that you can use. So you don't have to go around and find which model you want. Like there are so many papers, so many methodologies, so many deep learning frameworks. And here we kind of like make all the processes, all the steps for you. And I'm going to show a little bit later about these steps that we already did for you. So there are a wide variety of domains. So there are text. So we have models for text, audio, image, video, etc. And then we are also using different deep learning frameworks. So there is TensorFlow, PyTorch, Queiroz, for example. So you get a flavor of like all these different deep learning frameworks. And another point is there are the trainable models and the deployable models. The trainable ones are, we already trained the models. So you can, the trainable one, you can train yourself with your own data. And the deployable one, it's already trained and you can deploy in our application. So there are these two versions that you can use. Some of the models are trainable and deployable. Some of the models are only deployable. So here's the link again. I would totally suggest you to go over there and check it out. And then, by this time you're like, okay, so you're talking about deep learning, all these models, it looks awesome that you did a lot of steps for us. But how do I get started? I don't have deep learning background. I have no idea what deep learning is. So how do I get started in this journey? So the first thing that you need is Docker. And even if you haven't heard about Docker, don't worry. The only thing that you need is just to install. You don't need to know at this point what is going on behind the scenes, what Docker is, what Docker does. You can go and look it up later if you are interested, but you don't have to know what's going on pretty much in the back end. So you install Docker, and then you have some ways of accessing these models that I'm going to show you. There are some ways that I think are easier for myself because of my background, some ways that it's going to be probably easier for you depending on your background. So there are several ways of accessing the models, like how do you consume those models, right? I'm going to list some of them here. So let's get one example because I love examples. And I think, when you have an example, everything makes more sense. So we have the object detector. So the object detector is a model where I'm trying, or what we are trying to do is to localize and identify several objects in a single image. So in this example, I have this picture, and then this model is localizing and identifying which objects we have over here. So you can see that we have a person with a certain probability, and then we have a teddy bear. So that's what the object detector is doing behind the scenes, right? What is giving back to us. So again, if you go to the web page and you click on the object detector, it's going to open a page, right? So, and this particular model, they are deployable and trainable. So you have the two versions, right? So you go to that page, and then there are several options that I'm going to show you here. I'm not going to do a demo this time because we don't have much time, but you can check it out later. So when you go to get this model, we have some deployment options. You can do a deploy from Docker Hub, OpenShift, Kubernetes, or you can run locally. You can also try this API, so you don't have to install. Or you can try just with your browser. You can use the Swagger API. You can also, access this model using Python. So, and I made a notebook over here, so you can try it out later. Again, I don't have much time to show, but I'm providing a lot of links, and you can go and check it out yourself. You can also do via R. So in the repo, the slides link that I shared, there is an R script. You can try yourself as well. My favorite piece is to try via web app. So at this point, you don't have to have anything installed. It's like just links to different URLs. So you have the web app. We also provide all the code that you can make this web app yourself. And then there are other ways. What I'm showing over here, you have the Node-RED flow, you have CodePen, or you can do in a serverless app, right? So, and all of this is it is in a standardized way. So what do I mean by that? So what I mean is each model, when you go into the page, there is an overview section that is going to show you what is the goal, what is this model doing, what kind of data was used to train this model. architecture this model has. And you have the model metadata give you even more like information. And then you have references and license. Yeah, one thing that I didn't mention is all the models on the Model Asset Exchange use a friendly license, so you can use this without worrying, right? So even if you don't know anything about deep learning, just going through this overview, it's going to give you good knowledge around deep learning, right? So behind the scenes, these are the steps that we go through that you don't have to worry. So there are several steps that we need to, you need to find a model. We need to validate the license. We need to perform a model health checkup and cleanup and code cleanup. We wrap everything using a framework. And then we publish this as a Docker image on Docker Hub. And then if we are doing the training piece, also we use the training framework. And all of this is, there is a review and continuous integration going on, right? So this is all we do that you don't have to. So if you are feeling adventurous, so what I mean by that, the deployable ones are the easiest one to get started. But if you want to train your own model, you can use your own data. So when you go to that model page, there is a folder over there that shows you how to train the model using your own data. So again, all the instructions over there, you can go and check it out. So, right, so you went through the web page, but then you are overwhelmed because there are more than 30 open source models, and you don't know which one to start with, which one is maybe the easiest one, or which one makes more sense for you. So we also developed a tutorial for you, kind of like it's a learning path. So there are several modules where we give you an introduction to the Model Asset Exchange. Also, I'm leaving the URL over there so you can check it out later on your own pace. Right. So I would recommend you, if you are a totally beginner, to go through this tutorial because it gives you all the steps that you need. There is explanation and details, and you can do in your own pace, so you don't have to hurry. Right. Another thing that I'm going to share over here is the code patterns, and the code patterns is. We have the models, and then we kind of like create some kind of like application or ways of consuming these models. So one of my favorite ones is where we used a Model Asset Exchange model to create this. Let me go to the next one. To create this web app where you use your arms to make music. So it's pretty cool. You can try it out. You can do yourself. And then you use your arm, and then you create music. And in the back end, it's using a model, a human pulse estimator model. And it kind of like mimics this musical instrument from 1920 called theremin, where there are still like several bands that they use the instrument, and you see them like kind of like playing with their arms. And it's pretty fun, and it's a cool application for you to try. Also, if you are someone that likes IoT or like Raspberry Pi, we had a blog post on how to run the Model Asset Exchange deep learning models on a Raspberry Pi. So we guide you through on how to do this. And again, this is kind of like some of these pieces are like a starting point for you. And, you can do even beyond. So this is like some things that we provide for you so you can use, and then you can go even further, right? I talked about the Model Asset Exchange, which is a good way for you to get started with deep learning. But one thing that we don't notice, or we don't know when we start doing deep learning, is it is so hard to find data sets, like open data set that you can use to train your models, that you don't have to worry about licenses. So that's why we created this other piece, which is like a project that comes with the model asset exchange, which is the data asset exchange. So the data asset exchange is this curated repo for open data sets that come from IBM research and 30 parties. So there are several data sets that are created from IBM research that now it's being published in our website. And one of the differentials is the data sets are published under data-friendly licenses. Most of them uses a license called CDLA, and you can use in your enterprise, in your project without worrying. And again, we took care of like thinking about a standardized format and metadata, so you know to track each data set that you use from the data asset exchange. Another plus side of this is many of these data sets, they have like others notebooks. So how do you ingest this data? How do you clean this data? How do you explore this data? How do you analyze this data? So it's also like a good way of you learning these processes as well. As a data scientist, so important to know how to do these steps and to get to the final, analysis piece. So you can also check it out on the Data Asset Exchange webpage. As I mentioned, if you go to one of the data, you have this Trident notebook. So it's going to link you to an IPython notebook where we guide you through all the steps that you need. Again, we try to make sure that we have tutorials. So if you are kind of person that likes the steps by step, we also have a tutorial on how to get started. So it's a tutorial on how to show you on how to use this data, or how to use the data asset exchange. What are like the possibilities? What are the things that you could do using the data, right? So you also have the DAX tutorial. One thing that is not related to MAX, to the model asset exchange, but the data, and not to the data asset exchange, but it's another passion of mine, and it's not deep learning at this point. It's around AI fairness, and there is a whole discussion about discrimination, bias, fairness, and so on. And at IBM and other companies, they are in this path of like discussing and providing more and more ways of mitigating bias. And we have this toolbox called AIF 360. And until 2 weeks ago, it was only available in Python. And myself as an R user, I was very frustrated, but I couldn't see anything like that in R. So 2 weeks ago, we released the R package of the AIF 360. And now also we have compatibility with scikit-learn. So you can use AIF 360 with your scikit-learn pipeline as well. So that's a very new project, open source project again, that you can use to mitigate bias. It's such a crucial piece of a data science work that we all should be aware of. We all should be discussing more and more. And we all should include this in our way of thinking, in our data pipeline. So if you never heard about this, if you are new to this area, I recommend you going and trying to educate yourself in this piece as well. We as a data scientist, it's not only about analyzing data and creating models. There are a lot of like critical thinking that we have to add to our, skill set as well. So that's all I had. I wanted to make sure that we have some time in the end so we can ask questions. So my contact information is in this this last slide. Feel free to contact me, to send me a note or any question that you have. I'll have some time now to answer.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gabriela. We did have a couple of questions come through. One of them was, can you describe your experience as a statistician I can't pronounce it. It's a tongue twister. Getting into deep learning, how did your stats background make it easier or more difficult?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I had I studied a lot of probability and all the classical statistical modeling. I didn't have any exposure to Python or deep learning or machine learning, to be honest. So for sure, it helped me a lot. It helped me to understand what is going on behind the scenes. It helps me because I have a good understanding of math and especially I think the critical thinking, to think about the hypothesis and all that. So it was easier for me with this background. I don't think more difficult for sure. No. Maybe let me go back. Maybe there is one piece that it took me a while to understand. So in statistics, we have some terminologies. And then for example, in machine learning, we have different terminologies. And they kind of get confused, right? In between, we get confused. So we have to make sure sometimes that you understand what the other people are talking about, because sometimes they are talking the same thing as you, but they use a different terminology. So terminology is a key thing as well, especially coming from statistics. So make sure that you know what they are talking about, because prediction in one, it's one thing, and then in the other one, it's another thing. Inference for a statistician is one thing. Inference for deep learning people, it's another thing. So just make sure that you know what the terminology is. So, but it's easier being a statistician and going to deep learning and machine learning.
Awesome. And then I think we have time for one more question. Which computer programming language would you recommend to learn for data science and health? Python, R, or something else?
Okay, I'm very biased in that sense. I love R. So I think for data science and health, my biased opinion, it's R. It's a good way. I did I come also from a health background. I did epidemiology, and I worked with epidemiology for several years, and we all use R. But I think it's if you are good with one language, it's very easy to translate to a different language. So it depends on what type of work you are doing. But in my biased opinion, in data science and health, R, it's more used, and you have more resources. So that's my opinion.
Awesome. Yeah, I asked that question because I knew you would have a strong opinion on that one. There's a few that we're not able to get to, but I will definitely send you those and you can follow up offline. And then to the people asking those questions, feel free to paste them in Slack as well. We have a questions channel in there, so our speakers can follow up on questions in there as well. You can just tag them.
Perfect. Yes, I'll follow up on the questions on the Slack. I'm there.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I will see you in the next session.
That was Gabriela Queiroz, Senior Machine Learning Manager at IBM, with her advice and guide on how you can start using deep learning without previous knowledge. She also showed how you can have a basic ready-to-use deep learning service running in less than 5 minutes. And if you'd like to watch more videos like this one, you could subscribe to the DSS Insider program, where you could see a complete on-demand video repository from a wide range of topics. Subscribe using the link in the comments, and also make sure to follow us below. Thank you.